Okay. Microphone picked up. Do you hear that from us? Bob and Paula, do you guys are you hearing this?
Yes.
And so I just asked if there were any changes to the agenda. There are none. Open the public meeting.
Not that I saw.
Superintendent Westerberg will give us an overview of closed session. We talked about interdistrict transfers. They are very similar to previous years. There are very few new ones. Most of them are just repeats from previous years where parents live in Ukiah and they transfer their families because of work. We talked about a disciplinary issue, just the basis for what I'm doing a little bit of an investigation on.
I can't hear you.
To one in either of the bargaining units. Then we talked about being prepared for negotiations that we have. There were no decisions made.
I'm wondering if it would be possible for whoever is speaking to maybe come
It's not just me.
to the microphone. We are able to hear audio, but there's a lot of distortion, so it's really hard to hear what's being said.
Thank you.
Yeah. One of the things that would be helpful for participants is to mute their microphone unless they're going to talk, because that creates some backfeed.
On the top right of your screen, when you're in Zoom, you should be able to touch up there or move your mouse up there and click on mute. When you're ready to talk, click on unmute and you start talking. As soon as you're finished talking, click on mute again. That eliminates all the background noise at your location and it helps us, everybody feel you. Okay, so we have reconvened to open session. I'd like to do a flag salute. And the flag is there. Mr. Chavez. In this flag of the United States of America, and the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Let's see. We have the Willits quarterly report. Each year for the last several years.
Well, I had a question. What was the big side on the green? It goes back to the child wants the money and that was in place. And this is that program, the schools that were designated to be around the world. It'll be those same schools forever. It's not
We have website under the floor.
we do independently mark and at all.
Measure I, General Bond, number 22.
Measure I, we put back on the ballot our proposal for, and that GEO bond is the approximately $17 million, depending on property values that fluctuate. And we're looking at doing the same thing with phasing it in over time. We are taking into consideration economic conditions. And as a board, we can choose to have that be $20 per 100 up to $40 per 100. And we can make that decision based on economic issues. Part of the reason for putting it on the November ballot is if we don't put it on the November ballot now, we have to wait 2 more years. Election cycles are now even year cycles. And so we would have to wait 2 years to do this. The good thing about how we have our bond structured is, we can put this bond out, and let's say the economy tanks. Even if it passed, as a board, you could say, well, we're going to wait a year to issue. Or the economy's maybe getting a little better, we're going to only issue at $20 per 100. We could do multiple, we're scheduled to do 4, but we could do 5 or 6 bonds, send out bonds 5 or 6 times. Essentially, the community gives you the authority to raise bonds for $17 million. The board can set the amount and the format of that. And so that way you're not caught up in an issue of economy and all those things. And my advice would be that we put it into place. The other issue with that is that the good news is we're not building anything new. We're going to fix and repair what we have money for. So whether we get 20 per 100 or 40 per 100, we're going to fix less with 20 than we are with 40, but we're still going to start to fix them. And over time, we can roll that obligation out. The good news is if it passes, we should have a 10 to 12 year window of funding to continue to fix and repair. Because we're not going to fix our sites in a summer. It's going to take multiple years of getting this in place, especially if we want to use local. You know, there's only so many people who can do these projects. And so for us, we don't have a set of projects. We're not hiring architects and engineers and inspectors and all that stuff. We're fixing it ourselves. We don't need an engineer to do the roof. It's awesome. We need to get the roof done. And so we are asking to put that back on.
All I had earlier was how much additional expense it costs to add measure I, considering the fact we already have an election for 2 board members, myself and COVID.
Right. We were on the ballot anyway. It was an additional $500. And so, again, the other issue is that we've been in communication with the charter school. We've talked about working out an agreement with them to incorporate some of the funding to go to them, a small percentage of it compared to what we would get. But if we're going to help all kids, this would help all kids. And we were very close last time. We were 54.84%. And to be really honest with you, we're going into what we know is going to be a tough financial year.
Yeah.
And if we have roofs, if we have parking lots, there's only one place it can come from now. And so we really need to pass this bond issue to make sure we don't have to take anything unexpected out of what we have. And let's be honest, it's high time to start fixing our facilities. And so this is all part and parcel of that, but it's a timing issue. We have it all submitted. We have the measure I now is on the ballot, as well as the 2 board members. And so now we just need to go into the mode of making sure everybody understands that this is not going to hit, we don't have to hit them for $40 on 100 right away. We can look at the economy. The strange thing is property values aren't dropping right now. The potential is they may, but it doesn't mean that they're going to right now. So that's what it's really based on. However, there's more than property to consider. There's economy and so as a board, we would use our consultant, Adam. He's given me some key indicators. Here's how you know. This is kind of your deciding factor on what you ask for and when. Our first mission is to pass it. If we pass it, we will gladly deal with that problem. But I think everybody needs to know that the board is in total control of the amount and the number of bonds that get dispersed.
Do we know if anybody else from the county is voting bond?
I don't believe on this one there are, honestly, because they don't have to, they've all passed theirs.
I mean, you kind of-
Yes, it did.
You did.
The final count.
Yeah. Ukiah, Fort Bragg, Laytonville, Covelo, Mendocino, all have passed bond issues to fix their facility. We are the only one in the northern half of the district not in a bond issue fixing things.
Well, in some respects, that's a good thing because that way the elections folks don't screw up the information.
And ask them to be careful
Yes.
when I filed it. I said, please be careful.
Okay.
I'm going to leave that. Anybody who's here should be here now.
We did not pass that one by 9 votes.
And let me just say, going into this year financially, that would have been really helpful to help our general fund budget for capital outlay, especially with these things. But yes, that is on the ballot.
Okay, so we're done with Measure I. We're at WQA comments. You're up, Tessa.
So, I wanted to let you know that we honored our retirees, Joe Walton, Hopi Wise, and Laura Hanson, Priscilla Dodge, by delivering flowers, gift cards, and balloons to their homes. Very surprised and delighted because they had kind of a flat meeting. And so that was a really fun moment.
Did we get their plaques to them as well?
No, they're at my desk.
Yes.
Regarding the planning committees, we don't feel like there was broad enough representation from the educators. We had 3 out of 100 members were involved in strategic planning, and we'd like to have a little bit more involvement in that. It's a non-antagonistic situation entirely. We truly want to develop, a successful plan going forward. And a number of members didn't feel like they had an opportunity to be heard. So we hope to join you a little bit more often.
The goal, just to tell you, the goal was to try and limit the meeting to 12 because that was kind of the marquee number when we got started.
I can address that a little bit too. This was, I asked that everybody that went to that meeting or got selected for that committee reach out to their peers, their colleagues, them reach out and let them know that, one, they're part of this committee, and to poll those people for their ideas. The idea was to try and get a committee that was small enough to get something done, but big enough to be able to reach out to all their colleagues and peers to hopefully get those ideas.
And I understood that. I understood that was your goal. We just didn't feel that it worked quite well enough. I don't think there was enough representative input with them.
So that committee's work is not yet done.
I know.
So there is still time to make sure that everybody's voices has an opportunity to.
Okay. Last month, we did a membership survey. I just wanted to share with you briefly the results. We got about 2/3 of our members responded, which is pretty good. The highlights of that survey are that 60%, 60 to 70% are looking at a hybrid or wanting, desiring a hybrid or full virtual scenario. They wanted to be, there was a lot of concern about cleaning supplies, masks, hand sanitizer, face shields, etc., because there is a history of teachers ending up buying things for their classrooms, and that was a big concern for a lot of people. The tech and Wi-Fi issues were prior for students, and we weren't ready for one-to-one Chromebooks and the hotspots and all of that. But that was a big concern with virtual learning, distance learning. Another thing that they are concerned about is what are the plans for teachers who are at risk and cannot go, that they can't risk being full-time in the classroom. They were very concerned about, what the scenario is going to be for them. And he's been kind of a busy guy, so I haven't actually had a chance to talk to him about that too.
That particular question is being bandied around pretty widely around the state, and there are some pretty strong ideas about how to do it.
I'm just representing my members right now, sharing that with their concerns were. Substitute shortages were a problem before we went into this crisis situation. They will continue to be one, especially since our sub pool was pretty much older people, at-risk people. And the potential of serial quarantines if we return to the classroom, that was another big concern, as in one student, just the domino effect of one student having to close down or quarantine that class for 14 days, and then another one comes out again and again. The parents won't just get fatigued from the serial quarantine effect and decide to homeschool their students instead of having this up down scenario. So those were the top issues that I got feedback on. When it comes to distance learning conditions, they wanted me to be sure to share with you that they want standards of course quality and consistency across grade levels and at sites, training and professional development to prepare for hybrid or full virtual learning, and the tech and Wi-Fi to support that scenario. And you don't have any questions about any of that, or can talk about it later, we'll have a chance. I'd like to turn it over to Brian. He has a statement he'd like to share with the board.
Will it be okay if we can hear with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Tessa. Good afternoon, Superintendent Westerberg and members of the Willits Unified School District. I would like to begin by voicing my respect and gratitude for the personal and professional time that each of you devote to this school district and the community as a whole. The roles are never easy, even in the best of circumstances. The fact that we have a mixture of you here physically as well as remotely, in the small capacity limits of this large room, are a testament to the times we find ourselves in.
Right.
Equally important, I would like to remind us all of the devotion, inspiration, and tireless efforts and professionalism of the entire workforce at Willits Unified. We all work tirelessly and often selflessly to deliver students the safest transportation, sanitary spaces, and educational environment and opportunities that we can, while simultaneously supporting the socio-emotional needs of our youth. We are all experts in our fields who together represent a vast amount of institutional memory, experiential knowledge, problem-solving strategies, and support mechanisms. Our professional camaraderie and support of each other allows us to weather not only the daily torrents that arise in our classrooms, buses, and hallways, but also the hurricanes of community tragedies that affect us all. We recognize the minuscule triumphs of our students that help build confidence and celebrate the milestones that become the cornerstones of their character. I remind us collectively of these strengths because we are in historically uncertain times that no one individual can claim experience with. The need for honest collaboration based on factual data is more necessary now than at any time in my career or lifetime. The realities and parameters of each of our school sites bring separate challenges. These are compounded with physical projections coming from the state. It is because of these extenuating circumstances that I implore you as board members to take a more in-depth role in understanding, questioning, and soliciting input from the professionals that you have here at your fingertips, as well as those in our immediate and global community. The input gleaned from our individuals and the collaborative process as a whole will allow for an array of proposals to weigh and to choose from that has had the benefit of many minds fleshing out the details and finding potential problems before we are forced to deal with them on the run. The decisions made by this board will have major effects on the health, safety, and long-term education of our students, staff, and our community at large. Thank you for your time. I will be
And in the chat box, I said that I needed to hopefully it recorded.
It did.
Well, what is recorded?
It recorded here.
Oh,
Thank you again. We really appreciate all the efforts that are put forward. And go watch this on Zoom.
Thank you. Well done, Brian. So I can address at least some of that. One of the key ones that you mentioned that your survey came across was wanting to make sure that we provided the appropriate sanitation throughout all the schools. I think I can say fairly confidently that the district will do everything necessary to at least meet or exceed whatever the health departments are going to require. We would have to by law anyway. As far as teachers having to buy their own cleaning supplies and things like that, once we've met the minimum requirements and hopefully we exceed those minimum requirements, which that's what I would argue that would be our goal. If they want to do something beyond that, I can't help that. But rest assured, this board is going to strongly support us spending whatever we have to spend to make sure that we do at least the minimum and hopefully.
Just a couple things so you know that things that are already in place. We've already sent to stockpile toilet paper, disinfectant, hand sanitizer. We've purchased a mask for every student and teacher, and we are purchasing 2,200 of the PPE masks, the glass shield masks. We already are quite aware that our custodial practices are going to change. We're going to have to go to what I call a pickup, dump trash in half the rooms because we're going to have to disinfect in all of the rooms. We already know that. We're already looking at some other ways to disinfect with electrostatic piece of equipment, all 5 of these flex sites. So we're pretty well aware of what we got to do to get that done. For me, the issue really isn't disinfecting. A lot of people like to look at disinfecting as a strategy that's going to be really helpful. The truth is, it's transmitted person to person. The reality is masks are more important than any disinfectant. Because after we disinfect the room, as soon as 20 kids walk in the room, everything's back.
It's all the data is really telling us that 3 things I should say, are going to help us minimize the transmission of this disease. 1 is masks wherever it's appropriate. 2, distance between us wherever it's appropriate, wherever we can. And the 3rd, of course, is hand washing and keeping the hands of the kids. If we all manage to handle those things to the best of our ability, we're not going to be able to eliminate the risk, but we'll be able to lower it possibly to a point where hopefully it doesn't spiral out of control.
Every child is going to need, see, that doesn't work.
Every child is going to need to have their own set of materials and supplies and things like that. Traditionally, about 50% of the kids maybe don't come with supplies, and traditionally the teachers are, so.
Nancy and Kathy have already purchased totes, and they're going to put together a tote box for each child where they all have their own stuff.
Good.
High school tends to be their book bag. But K-5, we have to have where they all have their totes, where they have their own stuff, because we don't want their stuff. Although it depends on what research you're saying, touching something, may transmit it or having their own totes. And my goal is to bring that group together to get input and ideas, because there are three major factors. Obviously, there's the virus. There's also the financial reality of where we're headed. And there's the academic concern about providing a quality academic program that's not just checking the box so we can get in. And so those three things are going to kind of have to all work together in some fashion. There's no way we can guarantee that nobody's going to get it. Howard Hospital can't get it. So neither can we. But we're going to try and do the things. I've looked at schedules in each one of the buildings that reduce the student-to-teacher ratio. I've looked at high school dropping down to 3 periods where they have minimal group contact. We've done the same thing at Bechtel. At Sanhedrin, we've looked at doing AM/PM schedules. So I'm putting into place things that we can reasonably afford to do that make sense, that help them. And in my opinion, that's probably where we should start out. There's probably only 3 scenarios for next year. We start back the way normally with new rules, or we start back in what I call our COVID schedules. And the other way is we're online teaching. So it's going to be one of those 3 scenarios. And it depends on if your glass half full or half empty. I don't know what 2.5 months from now are going to be like. I do want to look at the calendar. I think spinning back the calendar about 3 or 4 days, we could have a start date of August 31. The rationale there is, let's let it hit the fan in a bunch of other districts to see what's going on before we have to get involved. And I'm saying that because Ukiah is starting August 10th. And so the reality is we can easily make those days up within the year, especially if we do virtual days. And in short, we could do a virtual day on Martin Luther King Day. It'd be a great day to do a virtual day. Let's talk about tolerance and acceptance. Use that as a virtual teaching on that day. So I think we can spin the calendar back a little bit. I think we can look at models that are going to work, but there has to be a balance between the number of staff we have, the number of staff we can afford, is it academically sound, and is it providing a better, safer environment? And we've got a lot of things that we're going to experiment this summer a little bit, because we're going to have some special ed, summer school, and right now, Kids Club is talking about doing some summer programs. So Sabrina's already, Rodriguez is doing some of her child care over there at Gloucester. So we're getting some practice in place, and we're seeing how it works and what doesn't. You know, and the issue of face masks, because everybody wants to talk about, are you going to make me wear a face mask? Virtually everything we've read to basically 0 to 12 years old, it's recommended, optional. Which makes sense. It'd be pretty hard to have 5-year-olds and not have any face mask violations, if you will. Yeah. So the issue there is, in our K-5 world, can I keep a lower number with the teacher, a more stable population that makes more sense? The fewer times they transition and the fewer number of students they have in that room, the less likely we are to be problematic. And so that's what I'm trying to work. At the same time, I have to make sure we can afford to do it. So they're not contrasting, but they're coinciding.
So we are to the next. Dan Green, you are up.
Do we have a Dan? Yeah, he's there.
Yeah, I'm here. Everything we get from you is about half the words. There may be a conflict between Mark's microphone and Alex's microphone. Because we can't tell if Alex's microphone is off.
Mine is off.
Okay, so we're getting about half of everything you guys say.
But do you have your microphone on?
It may be proximity to Mark's microphone or not pointed at him or anything. But that being said, about this COVID stuff is we're getting a new piece of paper about every 3 days that tells us there's something different we have to do. It's not the old stuff, it's something new. It's always changing. So to plan right now, it all changes in 3 days. It's kind of weird. That being said, it's actually, you know, this stuff is hitting the budget and it's hitting people's lives at the district. And I'd like to thank Mark and Laura, and especially special ed right now, for working with the classified staff to try to keep people.
I think we lost you somewhere, Dan.
Work next year, it's not going to be a blame it on anybody thing. It's going to be everybody's going to have to step up, and everybody's going to have to help in some capacity, even if it's not in their job. Because if it doesn't, it's going to get worse, and everybody's going to have to help each other. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for this lesson. Yeah, that's important.
I'd like to start with Paula. Paula?
Yeah, I'm not hearing you guys very well. I missed most of Dan's.
We can't
But-
hear you. Raise your microphone.
I'm sorry, what, Jeannie?
You got to step up to your microphone a little better.
Oh, okay. I'm going to do that. All righty, well, first, this is my report turn, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I just didn't get most of what he said. But anyway, what I wanted to do first is apologize for not being able to make it to the graduations. I was grounded to my house. And, but I did hear a lot of really good feedback. That's a big deal, and I'm really glad for it. The other thing is, I do appreciate what Tessa had to say, and Brian, as far as collaboration and people wanting to be involved in the, you know, the little more active part of what to do. I understood that we were going to have a small group, and I understood that some schools did really good about, you know, making sure everybody was involved, but not everybody participated. And I'm glad that since we still have time, more people can get involved and get themselves represented. It's just maybe if the district could put out some times where Mark or us or somebody could be free to listen to them if they don't feel so comfortable with their representative. One of the things I was curious about, maybe today or some other time soon, is what the criteria was for choosing the people that Mark selected to be on the committee. Anyway, just because I had some thoughts on how that might be done, and that weren't done that way at all, which doesn't mean anything except that I did kind of want to know how were people selected. The other thing that kind of comes to mind a lot is that I didn't notice any particular Sherwood representation there. I know, Mark, that you are the principal, but it might have been good to hear a little of their specific concerns, just because I've heard from a couple of parents that go there, and they are concerned for their kids, although they certainly seem to be interested in sending their kids. They were just concerned that a 20-to-1 ratio was high, and they wanted to know why they didn't have 16 or less. And so I did hear Mark saying that, you know, it's kind of its own little bubble over there. And that's the best I guess I can tell them, but I know that that was kind of a concern. I am concerned about the Nuestra Alianza. I haven't heard anything about them for summer school. I'm interested in knowing if it's Migrant Ed didn't have funding, or their grant ran out, or what's happening, because as far as I know, there is no summer school for that. And I was interested in why. I had a little gossip from January, I mean, from around the county office that some people there are talking about opening in January instead of August. I prefer the late start that Mark just said, where, you know, we kind of wait till the end of August or so to see what happens. But I really do hope that we have a viral or whatever plan that we can use in case things don't work out like we expect, or if we pull an Israel, so to speak, and we're there for a couple of weeks and then we all go home again. I'm glad there's a stockpile and things like that. And I really do hope we work out the custodial trainings and changings and spend at least a day making sure everybody's aware how things are going to be cleaned, because we especially know that the minute you walk into the room, it undoes all the germ-freeness that it had. And if we're going to have people coming in and out, it's going to need a wipe down in and out. Otherwise, you're back to those 90 kids and all the people they touch and all their families, or maybe not 90, but it'll be a good 60, and on to do all the contact searching. And then lastly, I was a little curious. I heard that the high school was going to have a COVID testing couple of days, and then I never heard that it happened. And I know Ukiah is still doing it Tuesdays through Saturdays. I think it's 9 or 10 in the morning until 4 or 5 in the evening, although I'm not sure exactly where. It was the fairgrounds, I guess, and it was Mendo College. But I would like to know a little bit more about that. And I guess that's about all for right now.
Bob?
Mr. Colvin.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate what Dan Green said. I think this is a very important time for all of us to cooperate and help each other. And that's it for now, for me.
Thank you. You got
Hi, Jeannie, board member, and I have a number of things I want to say. Is that I didn't attend any of the graduations except for the high school graduation, and I sort of got comfortable at home not wearing my mask, and I didn't want to have to show up someplace and figure out how to socially distance and have to wear a mask, and I thought that. Anyway, it was easier to stay home, but I followed things as well as I could online, and I know that the staffs at all 4 schools and 5 schools, including Sherwood, did a really wonderful job of commemorating this transition for students into graduating from school together. It was moving on to this higher level. Penny asked that you speak up. Okay, thank you. Anyway, and I thought the high school graduation was just absolutely wonderful. I'm just absolutely just, it was just such a pleasure to watch the kids come onto the track in those cars. And one thing I heard is that parents really got a lot out of being there in the cab with it. And they felt really a part of things in a way that was much greater than they would have otherwise. And I was so impressed with how the town turned out. I didn't go through the procession, but where I live, I had to go through a block of it. And I could see down Main Street that there was just all kinds of people out there waiting to acknowledge the graduates as they passed by. They had to wait for a while because the graduation ran, 45 minutes longer than it did otherwise, and we had planned. And I was just really impressed with the town. So I think that students felt a really wonderful send-off from the town. So I think it's really good. And I've been participating on the planning committee for next year, trying to figure out how we're going to educate our students and at the same time meet the requirements put out by the state and the public health officer in regards to COVID-19. And anyway, one thing I want to say is that I'm really impressed with the efforts of all the teachers the past 3 months, the administration administration, the maintenance crews, the custodial crews, everybody was talked about and needing to be flexible and to step up and help each other is that I've really seen a lot of tremendous effort in not only in meeting the students' needs and taking care of our schools. And anyway, it's been wonderful to observe. And I also wanted to say that I really appreciate Beckerville Middle School's administration's efforts at communicating with the board. Every Monday we get communication from Beckerville Middle School as to what's going on, what they've done, and where they're at. And I really, really appreciate that attempt at continuing to communicate during this time. And I also wanted to read something that I sent out to the teachers, or the teachers and administrators, the people that are on this planning committee, because I think this is really important. This is from a column in Sunday San Rosa Press Democrat a couple weeks ago. This is just a quote from me. Let us not forget that the wonderment of the classroom, the source of its transformative possibilities, is rooted in the humanity of the people gathered in the same place at the same time. The best teachers are not maestros of education apps or virtuosos of virtual instruction. They are savants of human transformation because of their capacity to forge powerful connections with their students, inspire their best efforts, and engage them in meaningful and personal ways. There are no shortcuts on the path to changing the human life, no technological panaceas. Powerful teaching is about an adult believing in us, showing us a higher path. If some of us have seen stars, it is often because the teacher lifted our heads towards the heaven. Anyway, that's how I feel about what really goes on in the classroom. And I also wanted to share, I shared this with the planning committee today, is we got the School Board Association sent out a COVID-19 planning thing, was 25 pages. I thought it was really well organized and well written. And they had a pyramid, which the very base of the pyramid was safety and health. And safety and health of students and staff has to come first. And then the next thing higher on the pyramid was funding and resources, because we can't come to do things that we don't have funding and resources to do. And then adaptable quality teaching and learning was the next highest on the pyramid. And this pyramid has to do with COVID-19, not generally how we teach or how we go about. And then flexibility was at the top. And then it tied it all together was equitable supports for all students. So I just wanted to share that. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Well, I just want to reiterate what Jeannie said about the graduation and promotions. The community came together. It was unbelievable what they did for our babies. I mean, I was so excited. I did get a chance to go to the middle and high school and saw a lot of the activities on Facebook for the other schools. And I just appreciate all the staff, all the work that went into that, and the community willingness to work with us. So I so appreciate that. And Jeannie, you didn't share how our kids are going to be using their masks next year. Jeannie sent out a little email that talked about the different things our kids will do with their masks. It was very cute. Other than that, you know, as a group, because of this budget we're going to be facing, and that's part of the agenda this evening, we're going to have to batten down the hatches. And like everyone has already said, we're going to have to work together to get through this. But we will get through this, most definitely. Willits is a wonderful place to live and work. So get ready. Here we go.
Nancy says there are 2 mics open at the meeting and it's causing feedback.
This mic is open. Alex would be. Trina, are you on Zoom?
I'm not on Zoom.
I'm not on audio at all.
My advice would be to close your laptop if there's no reason to Zoom is recording.
Test 1, 2, Mackenzie, did that help? It'll come up on screen. So, let's see, briefly talking about graduation. Graduation came off, at the high school came off far better than many of us could possibly have expected. It was well attended, obviously, by our graduates and their families. The rodeo style turned out to be a pretty cool idea. We want to congratulate everybody that put that together and thought about it. And there's no small amount of work went into it. And it came off very, very well. I want to say thank you for that. And I got to participate by being one of the parking attendants. Yeah. But it all worked out well. We'll talk briefly about what Mark's talking about as far as the COVID schedule. There's been a tentative document put out. I want to emphasize it is a tentative document. Okay? It's still open to change. It's the best we can put together up to this point. We're still looking for input from anyone and everyone that feels like they need to take. If you've got some more suggestions, ideas, please bring them forward. The whole idea behind this committee was to do nothing more than provide the board with a set of options so that when we do have to make the decision as to whether we are coming back with a COVID schedule of some kind or a distance learning environment or something in between, we want those options and we want the best set of options that you can provide for us. None of us have been through this before. We recognize the fact that the superintendent will not have all the answers. The principals won't have all the answers. Indeed, the teachers won't have all the answers. But we're hoping that collectively we can come up with the best plan to move forward. That's really where we're trying to go. I want to talk briefly about personnel changes. About 3 weeks ago, Governor Newsom came out with his proposed budget. He proposed to cut our current budget, this year's budget, by about 4.5%. That would equal about $800,000 of money that we basically already spent. Not a good thing. He also proposed to cut educational spending across the board another $18 billion next year. That amounts to about 14.5%, or to us, if it was spread equally across the board, about 2.4 to 2.6 million. Since then, they've come back and said, we're probably going to have a hit of about 1.4 to 1.6 million. It's still an enormous number. However, when Mark and I started, Superintendent Westerner, started talking about the budget specific to the impacts of COVID-19 2.5 months ago, I asked him to start putting together a plan that would allow us to make incremental changes so that we don't find ourselves in the position we did after the last economic downturn. We don't want to be having to be forced. I don't want to be forced into a position like we did last time, where we had a principal and one counselor running the high school. Clearly, that did not work for us, but we were in a position where we had virtually no choices. If we plan ahead now, it gives us the opportunity to have greater choices in the future. A number of economists are saying that this problem that we're having economically is not, we're not going to be out of the woods in the state until 2024. Hopefully that's not the case and we bounce back much more quickly, but we still have to take these people and at least consider that they might be right and make economic decisions that help us make sure that we are solvent throughout this whole thing. With that, obviously, a number of personnel changes are being proposed by the superintendent. They are not set in stone. Superintendent is making recommendations to the board, and the board is listening to those recommendations, and many of them, assuming the budget falls in the way that we expect it to, namely around the $1.6 million cut, we're making changes so that we can weather those cuts. If the state comes back with more money and we don't have it as drastic of cuts, the superintendent will come back with a set of priorities out what programs we're going to put back in place, what positions we're going to put back in place, and what order we're going to do that in, assuming we have those funds come back. I just wanted to make sure everybody understands that both the COVID schedule, the personnel changes, the recommendations mostly at this point, they could change again. Okay? With regard to communications, I agree with Jeannie. I really like the fact that principals as well as staff here have done an awesome job of keeping us as board members informed throughout this whole process. It was really easy for things to fall through the cracks. I'm fortunate that I have regular meetings with Mr. Westerberg, so I get the updates face to face. If the information comes directly from the principals, it's very much appreciated.
Several things. One is, I'll address the committee issue first. When we talked about doing this, we had the number of 12. And so, but we wanted a parent, we wanted kids club, we wanted some admins, we wanted teachers, we wanted board members, we wanted a medical person. And so when you start adding the numbers up, it becomes really impossible at 12 to represent every single thing and everybody. I tried to get people who represented multiple things. For example, I had Maddie because she's custodial and transportation. So I tried to get as broad a group as possible. I did put out a document today to them. It's a draft from me. There's nothing in stone. In fact, I'll send it off to Tessa. The admin's got it already and the board has it. You can send it around to everybody. It is my best guess of what we can afford to do at each building in what I call a COVID schedule. It's maybe not perfect, every detail isn't there, but between affordability, providing an educational environment that's solid, and maintaining safety, I think we have some good ideas there. The protocols, I already talked about the things we've already put in place for safety. We also have some timelines to deal with. This is going to change dramatically by August 20. Depends again if your glass half full or half empty. I have no idea. But 2 months from now, we can't wait 2 months from now. My recommendation to the board is going to be go into a COVID schedule to start the year. Either we're COVID schedule or we've had enough outbreak that we need to be in a stay-at-home model. I don't think coming back as normal with new rules is probably prudent, because to put the COVID schedule in place requires a lot of movement, a lot of staffing, and a lot of change. We're better off to put that in place because it's easier to come out of than to go into. In fact, in some cases, the high school could transition easily at a trimester. Bechtel could transition easily at a trimester. Sanhedrin can transition at 6 weeks. The K-5s, they may not want to transition. They may want to stay at 1 to 16. But we can make those decisions to come out instead of trying to rearrange everything to go in. And the budget that Nikki and I are putting together is reflecting a COVID schedule, which in some cases requires like some additional staff at Gloucester, but also takes into account the other systemic changes we've made. I'm going to say and Nikki can correct me, we're somewhere over $1 million in movement already to the positive with no layoffs. Everybody who's been misplaced has been reassigned or given the opportunity to reassign. So I'm doing this with the understanding of how do I keep everybody employed? How do we provide the best educational program? And what the heck are we going to do with this COVID virus? So I get lots of input. I get it from CSBA, board members, CDC. I'm on 2 meetings a week with the health department. There are tons and tons of resources. The problem is the rubber all hits the road when you come to Willits. Every building is going to be different than every other building. There's no way around that. We can't run the same schedule at the high school we run at Bechtel. They don't have that many teachers. We don't have more teachers that we can just kind of move around the places. We have a limited number of staff. And so every building schedule will look slightly different. It's a building schedule that tries to minimize the amount of contact the teacher has in the smallest groups possible we can have. Shortening some days, staggering some start times, doing things that are reasonable to help them. Beyond just the health and safety, masks, scarf, all that stuff. I'm talking about physical space and size. So it is a complicated process, and there are lots of good ideas. We need to be able to afford it. It needs to make academic sense, and it needs to be something that, is reasonable in scope. We're going to get rules from the governor. The governor's rules are going to be interpreted by the county health department. The county health department then interprets those rules based on our location. There are 5 locations in Mendocino. We are in the North County sector. In the North County sector, there have only been 7 reported cases. It includes Liggett, us, Laytonville, and Covelo. All 7 cases were in Covelo. They are done and over and passed. So in regards to our breakout, it's virtually non-existent right now. That doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. It means it's likely that we are going to have some type of how do we control it and what do we do when it happens is the issue. And how do we minimize people's risk? So all of those things were taken into consideration in the document I did, and I'll be glad to share that. It's no secret. I told everybody at the meeting, you can share it with whoever you want. What I do want you to know is that unlike other financial times, like in 2008, our district is in way better shape than it was when it hit last time. We are much more financially solvent than we were back in 2008 when we had this. The other difference here is we know what the problem is and we know where the end is in sight. This is not the banks collapsing and how are we going to get out of this, grind out of this recession. We know that we got to get people back to work. So I think the scope of the problem is more understandable, more obvious. So the state of California is going to give us what they can give us. The Republicans have said no to any new federal aid. And as long as they say that, we are what we are. We're at about a $1.4 to $1.6 million hit, providing that they get the revenue they're anticipating they're getting. That's the caveat there. They're making that assumption that they're going to get that revenue to give out. If they don't get that revenue to give out, the wounds will be deeper. So the good news of this is my goal is to keep every single person employed. You may not have the same job you had last year or like it what you had last year. I can't really help that. I have to put the pieces together. And I'm doing that to resolve people staying employed. And that goes with CSEA as well, because they all live in town. Those are unemployment numbers for us if we don't employ it. So I'm keeping all of CSEA up to speed. And we can keep what we have. That's the goal. And so we're pretty close. Nikki's going to tell you numbers tonight that you're going to go, oh. It's not tragic. We ended this year really well. We're going to go into next year and we're going to deficit spend some of our fund balance. That's what we have to do. If we didn't have that fund balance like we didn't have it before, you'd be up a creek. We're not up a creek. We'll be okay for next year. We're not great okay because we're losing money and you can't keep losing money every year, but we're going to be okay. So my big issues now are making the staff movements that make sense to help us in a schedule to deal with COVID, keep everybody employed, and try and keep everybody on the same page. I'm not going to make everybody happy because I've got to make decisions that make that happen. And when we get to a position, if the Republicans fell on their head and came up with the idea, hey, let's help all these states back out again, we could use some of that money to reinstate things. However, we can't just go run out and drop that in the salary because that continues on year after year. What we could do is use that to reinstate positions. And there are some positions, and I'll just give you some real simple examples. The EL programs at K-5 are really important. I'd love to put them back in place, but it's a funding issue. You know, that's a high priority for me. Those are things that we really need to put in place. We're down a custodial maintenance person right now, going into an unprecedented time of how much we have to clean and fix and repair. You know, so those are just priority decisions that have to be made. And I'll give the board a priority list for me of if we had funding, how would we put the pieces back in place? Because we can do that. Obviously, I wouldn't put a piece back in place if I didn't have a suitable replacement. But that will be an issue too, is staffing and when can you get them and the quality of what you get when you look. So.
And also the question of whether or not it's a one-time money fix or ongoing.
Right.
Clearly, one-time monies, we have to be careful how we deal with those because making the things that keep coming back to you.
Right. But we will make it through the financial disaster. We will have the most COVID conducive schedule we can afford to do that's academically sound. My big hope is that part of what we do is get a better home presence for what we do, distance learning, online learning, whatever name you want to use for it, independent study, whatever you want to call it. That's got to be a better product than what we had before. None of us assumed in May 15 or May 10, when I started figuring out this was going to happen, none of us had a clue it was going to last the whole rest of the year. We thought this was going to be a 2 or 3 week flu breakout and we'd be all good. Yeah. Yeah. So on March 10th, when I'm thinking about, oh no, we're going to have to shut down, what are we going to do? I had no idea it would last the rest of the year. I'm still stunned it lasts the rest of the year. But we have to be prepared with a better format to educate kids. And that format, K-5, is undoubtedly having kids in the building with a teacher. There's no better solution. How can we do that in a reasonable way? If we have an outbreak that doesn't allow that to happen, what's the next best thing we can do? That's what we have to come up with.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
We are at public comments for items that are current, public comments for items that are on the current agenda. Well, excuse me, that are on the consent agenda. Are there any comments for items on the consent agenda? Would work like that. So, no comments for any items that are on the consent agenda. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Second, Mr. Colvin. Any discussion on the consent agenda? No discussion on the consent agenda. Employee status changes, we've already discussed those. Okay, enough. All in favor of the consent agenda?
Aye.
Did we hear Paula?
Yeah, I said aye. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Carried. Item two, approval of skipping criteria with shared seniority.
Yeah, we have, in both, we have people who are hired on exactly the same day. And we have to make sure that the skipping criteria for who remains or who doesn't,
First thing, prepared.
yeah. Yeah, first in, first out, but the problem with that is sometimes there's two firsts. And so what you have in front of you is the criteria that has been used
We've approved this each year.
each year.
That's something that's required with each year.
Yes. Yes, because it's subject to change.
So, in the motion, a second for item C.
Well, I have a question.
Go
I
ahead.
have a question about the skipping criteria. This is the same as usual, and we're not using it, right? Because there's no one getting laid off?
So that's the plan. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
And
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's good, thanks. I was just making sure.
if we did have to use, obviously, with seniority is the predominant issue. If it's seniority, if there's two people at the same date, that's the only reason the criteria would come in.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's good. I didn't notice any difference from the last, well, from one of the real early ones, and I was just curious.
Paul, would you like to make the motion to approve?
Sure, I move that we approve the skipping criteria with shared seniority dates.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Get my eye.
Item B, J-Way, approval of 2021 declaration of needs for fully qualified educators and annual statement of needs.
Oh, mine got one-sided copy. Yeah.
This is it.
Right. Yeah, this is a form that says that we look for highly qualified educators and that they meet the criteria to get a certificate of endorsement. These are all these acronyms.
I'll second. Moved and second. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I have some discussion. Oh, okay. I just wanted to say this is an issue that bothers me a lot, to have non-credentialed teachers teaching when there are credentialed teachers around. However, the number is less. I am aware that there were not as many new hires this time because we cut staff, but it still is good that it's at 9 instead of 18 or 20, and I think that's a big deal to say publicly. Mm-hmm. What?
You mean, we hired 9 people on a PIP or a STIP? Yeah. Yeah, and you will find the vast majority of that is always in circulation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not uncommon. Unfortunately, I mean, I realize Paula doesn't like that, but the new world order, we have a shortage on top of this. And the teacher shortage is bringing us PIPs and STIPs, people who have bachelors and a CDEP or CLADs, whatever Laura calls them. people who don't have their full teaching credentials. I must tell you that our track record with people who are fifth and fifth is really very good.
Much better than our credential.
Yeah.
In terms of
Retention.
they complete their.
Yep.
Credential.
Yeah, they get their credential and they're a very successful teacher.
And they usually come to this community and they're sort of committed.
Right. Yeah. And often there are people who went out and did something else and they're coming to education by choice. And they've made a decision to change their, change what they do. And most of the time it's pretty productive. But there are times when it isn't. But there's a reason that everybody, I believe the number that I talked to somebody from UCI, I think they're at 20% of their staff is now PIP or STIP or one of those things. Just because it's so difficult to find teachers.
I just want to acknowledge Laura Seeker and the efforts that she puts in to find quality people to come work for the she does I know she looks great now.
We have been fully staffed for 3 weeks before school even got out.
So, do we have a motion for this yet? I believe so. I'll move. And looking for a second for item D.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye, sorry.
And carries. Moving on to item E. Approval of 2021 annual statement of need, 30-day substitute.
This is an annual thing we do to approve the long-term sub-permit. It's an annual thing.
Now, do the subs, are any of the subs stips or bits as well?
No, they're subs.
They're
Yeah.
credentialed teachers,
Yeah.
usually retirees.
Not retirees generally retain their endorsement. What these people are people who either don't want to be a teacher or don't have they haven't passed their CBEST or endorsements they need to have. There's certain criteria you have to meet besides just a bachelor's degree, like CBEST and those things.
I believe, Mark, that for the 30-day sub-credential, the requirement is that they hold a bachelor's degree and that they have passed CBEST, but they do not have to have passed the CSET.
The CSETs, that's correct.
But they do have to pass the CBEST.
Yeah. And we can't find enough of these people, by the way, because
Yeah, this is our day-to-day sub pool, and it's really a hard area to fill.
and that pool is going to get shallower, I have a feeling.
So do we have a motion to approve item E? Paul or Bob?
I move we approve.
Second by Mr. Chavez. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Carries. We are at item F. Approval of Office of Administrative Hearing, OAH agreement.
So do you know what the OAA is, Mark? You know
Yeah.
that? This is the Office of Administrative Hearing. This is it. We pass, I believe, with the WTA, and we have an agreement in place that we can move forward.
This is a document that basically says that we use administrative hearing to resolve contractual issues, and it's a fairly standard thing. And since we're only meeting for our second time, yeah, it's a little early, but it's also a necessary thing, requirement for the board. It allows you to operate if you're at impasse.
What would be the alternative if we didn't use the OAH?
Yeah. That's a really good question. It's probably one that our attorney would have to advise us on. And our attorney will probably advise us to do that.
So this is that other part that allows layoffs. Allows you to have layoffs after that March 15th date.
Yeah.
This is
If the total revenue limit is not reduced by at least 2%.
Right. And this is the document for us that is allowing after March 15 layoff, the summer layoff. And again,
But we knew this was coming.
yeah, this is kind of a version of this. It hasn't been out since '08. And again, I don't think we're going to be in a position to use it as a leverage, but as far as I know right now, this is something we should do just to make sure we hinge our bets on where we're going to be at. But
So I have a question. If you end up not needing to use these services after having approved it, are you obligated to the $48,000?
no, that's correct, right, Nikki? We're not obligated unless we use the service, correct?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what the original question was.
Are we obligated to the $48,000 to the hearing office if we don't use the service?
I don't know that I'm in the loop about the hearing. So I'm not sure what the obligations are.
A layoff proposal. And what happens when you do a layoff in the summer, just like when you do one normally, the employee can ask for a hearing.
Okay.
And this is saying that there's a $48,000 amount that we could be obligated for to do that, paying for hearings.
So I would be very surprised if we were required to pay that if we did not conduct actual hearings. But I can't say that for certain because I have not dealt with it before and I have not reviewed that contract.
Yeah.
It does say the maximum amount of this payment is, so it's not saying it's 48,000.
Right.
Well, it's a little bit more than that.
It depends on how many layoffs you have because every employee gets their own hearing. And so that's what it's doing. It's setting a max of 48,000 based on our budget district size. But
By 088, the local agency is 088 cost of rendering such services at the rate established. If you're not paying for it.
You can't hear.
And maybe up to 48,000.
yeah, yeah. The intent is to not render their services.
Okay. Do we need a motion to approve item F?
I second it.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I had a lot of trouble hearing what all was said, but in my past experience, a long time ago, we used something like this in the district. It was like paying for an insurance policy that you'd have representation for RIFs and other decisions to lay off teachers without that adequate notice. So is this still the same thing or have rules changed?
This is the same thing, Paula, except that it's coming up now to create the opportunity for summer layoffs where it normally would happen back in March. They reinstituted this to allow districts, because of the financial issues coming, to create a summer layoff window. That's why it's reappeared.
Okay, so what it is like charging about, what is that, $8,000 or $9,000, 9 fives? Yeah, a little over $9,000 a year to tell you that they'll take care of your cases in the event that you want to lay someone off during the summer. But at this point, we have no plans, the district, to lay anybody off during the summer, right?
Correct.
Okay, and so when you pay that 48, it doesn't say anywhere that I could read in there that it's a $9,500 deal per year. They want their 48 up front and you're good for 5 years. And my only question is we pay for legal services as it is. It would seem that it's just sort of an extra insurance policy. Is there another way you can explain it to me so I don't see it like that?
Not in on the in-service over it?
I did. I sat in on this with Laura on this training, and I'm not as with Laura is.
I know. Can she speak up,
Louder.
please?
So this Office of Administrative Hearing Agreement
Uh-huh.
says if we laid off certificated employees due to the new budget,
Mhm.
available after March 15th up to July 15th, I believe it is. This agreement, certainly, they're just making sure that, okay, the go-to agreement that Willits Unified did every advisement, we followed every timeline and all of those things. And so
Right.
they decide whether or not, it's my understanding, their agreement would then decide whether or not we legally released that teacher or not.
Yeah, and if
The
they
legal
render
part of it.
service, and we're not asking to render services.
Right. It looks like on page 4, there is section 6 where it discusses rates. And it states that in consideration of the performance of such services, the local agency agrees to pay the full cost of rendering such service at the rate established at the time the services are rendered.
Right.
That leads me to believe that this is not an upfront payment, but it's as used.
This is also, I believe, makes sense to me that if the employee challenges it, then you go to this point. If the employee doesn't challenge the layoff, then there's no issue.
Right.
Right. Yep.
Okay. So it's been motioned and it's been seconded. Paula, do you have anything further? Hello, Paula, do you have anything further? Is Paula unmuted?
Sorry, I was muted. Okay. Yeah, I did sort of, but I have to look into that some more is all. It's okay.
Okay. It's been motioned and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Didn't hear anything from Paula.
No, I'm going to abstain until I can figure this out.
Carries. Item G, consideration of and possible action on the resolution 2019-2018 regarding reduction/elimination of classified employee services. Item G.
This is something we worked out with CSEA. We negotiated the reduction in these positions. It is a part of the format is we negotiate that. Bring it forward to the approval. These are positions that we were able to either, we did not rehire or we relocated folks to. This is not a sense of layoff. We've worked out with the FDA. We mutually agreed on all these moves to.
Oh, speaking to the mic.
Correct.
There were some changes.
Yeah, we were all given other alternatives to move to, and that's the best we can do at this point.
And also, there are some on the list that were vacant to begin with. So, I mean, we were just identifying any area where we can make these changes without impacting staff or mitigate any impacts to staff.
Okay.
So items 1 through 4 say review reduce and items 5 through 10 say eliminate?
Yep.
Are eliminations the vacancies?
Yeah, for example, there's one that starts out with SISA or something, and clerk.
That's what reduced.
Those are reduced. What we did was we had 2 positions there. One is basically tech and one is clerk in our office. We combined those to 1 position. Rochelle does those 2 positions. Half of Rochelle's day, she's not in our office. She's doing that work. And so instead of having 2 positions, we scaled it back to 1. And so we went through and did a lot of these in our area. And we went through all of the districts with the SEA and made these adjustments.
So I was just curious because the use of the word eliminate
Right.
seems like
Eliminate means we're not going to rehire the position.
The position still exists, so we can use it later if necessary.
We would have to negotiate it its return.
And the four PE aides now, they're not on either list, but is that because, why is that?
It's timing.
Oh, okay, but so they should be on the no longer exist, right?
Right. Yeah, they'll be on the 17th. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's just timing, trying to get everything done in the amount of time.
Oh, okay. What school is the bilingual instructional assistant eliminated from?
Brookside. He took a position at, I believe it's the high school or Bechtel in special education.
Okay, so instead of replacing that, you just let it go?
Well, for right now, yes, because I'm not going to have an EL teacher for her to work with.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay, yeah.
you can't have an assistant if you don't have the other person. So
Sometimes, no. Okay, and then the food service assistant, so what school is that from?
That's actually an old one that's been on the books, and that particular one has been vacant, I think, for 2 years, just as when we did the hiring to replace, the person combined with another position that they took, so they didn't have enough hours to take on all of it, and they decided they did not need those hours. So that has already not been happening for a while.
But now that it's a 3-hour position, you're not looking for anyone, you're just adding it to someone with less hours, or are you just gonna leave it empty?
So right now what it is that somebody, when it was originally vacant, it was a 6-hour position and somebody only took 3 hours of it. So there's somebody currently in 3 hours, but there's been nobody in the other 3 hours for, I think, 2 years. So this gets that off the books, and that person just remains in that 3-hour position, plus they have one other 3-hour position. So there's no change on that one to the current cafeteria operations.
Okay. And then I only have 2 more things. My other thing is I'm real concerned about the night custodian elimination, especially because of COVID-19. I really do think that if we don't have the money to hire someone or anything like that, that maybe some other similar kind of employee could spend part of their time doing that or something. Bathrooms and Sanhedrin I'm not so worried about. I'm sure something could be figured out, but cleaning bathrooms is a big issue and had problems already. It just really concerns me about that. And then lastly, everyone has been notified, right? There are no, I still got to go see so-and-so about these layoffs, right?
everybody knows that. As it has been notified. The issue with the custodial is, Paula, is we had an opening and I chose not to fill that opening, and we're not even going to look at that until probably mid to late August. And that position may come back in a different form. So having custodial in the way it was before may be very different, or at least has the potential to be different to meet our needs.
Oh, okay.
And Nikki and I've already talked about that's one of them that that's one of those, I will tell you, it is one of the priority positions if we got magic federal funding. It's one of the positions that I need because we have a super
It
skeleton
happened to me.
custodial maintenance crew.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Great, so we are at item G. Need a motion to approve. A second. I'll move to approve.
Okay, I'll second it.
And second.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Is there any further discussion? Because it's a resolution, that is your roll call vote. So we'll start with Paula,
Yes.
Robert Colvin,
Bob?
Mr. Colvin, we need your vote. One more time.
Bob, can you hear?
We'll come back to Bob. Mr. Chavez.
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Colvin, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm here.
We need a vote on item G.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on. We're item H, approval of LCAP COVID-19 operations report. That's the last thing on the report packet.
This is a report that goes to the county office and is board approved. It is essentially saying we're going to take our LCAP and kind of put it on hold. We're doing these COVID things. And then in January, if it's okay, if we're back to whatever normal is, we'll reconvene our LCAP process. So it's kind of a 6-month stop for what are you doing with LCAP during COVID. A lot of the changes I've made, reduce funding and things like that, have LCAP implications. For example, we have $75,000 in LCAP for a student resource officer. Well, we're not going to have a student resource officer and not have teachers and EL programs. So that's a subtraction I've made out of LCAP to save us money. And this is part of that document. They're essentially giving us license to use LCAP somewhat creatively to get through the COVID situation until we can get into a position to do it normally.
I'll entertain a motion to approve and a second for item H.
I'll move that we approve item H.
Moved by Paul.
A second.
Any further discussion on item H? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Good, thank you. We're at item I, public hearing.
We're a little late.
Budget.
Yes, I'm going to attempt to do a screen share here, so bear with me a moment.
All right.
Now it says host disabled participant screen sharing. Are you able to allow me to screen share?
Is there,
The board welcomes public input.
Nikki, I gotta find you, okay?
Somebody from Santa Rosa called us.
Nikki, I'm trying to figure out where I give you the screen to share.
Okay.
Nikki, can you come onto the screen and then I'll see if I can click share with you.
I'm not sure what you mean. So when I hit share screen, then I get that message. Is it because you're not seeing my profile?
I'm going to make you the host for right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me give it one more try. Okay. Oh, we have many choices here.
You've now taken the meeting over, Nikki. There we go.
Okay, actually, I don't know that this is the one I wanted. Nope. Sorry, give me a moment. I thought that when I did screen share, it would just pull up the main item I had on my screen, but it is not doing that. Here we go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is a comparison of our estimated actuals compared to our now projected budget. So the first thing that I will obviously address is the revenue for LCFF. As Alex stated earlier, the governor's proposal is for a dramatic reduction to our LCFF revenue, which is our primary revenue source. And we are showing that projection to be about $1.4 million less for 2021 than what we had projected for 2021 during our second interim update. And you see, yes.
Tell us what page you're referencing right there.
So are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so where I am looking is the very first line where it says LCFF sources under revenue. The first set of columns you can see relate to the estimated actuals, and the second area is the 2021 budget on the right.
Yeah.
And
Please just a number, Nikki. Do you have the numbers?
I'm sorry?
You had Jenny number the pages. Do you have the number?
So I did not put that part up only because the scan was blurry. And so in terms of seeing it on the screen, this seemed like the easier way to look at it. So what you guys are looking at, it should be page 1. At the top, it should say Form 01.
Yeah.
And it's unrestricted and restricted. And you can see that on the far right column where it shows a decrease of LCFF revenue of 9.1%.
Yes.
Okay, so that is the page I am on. And again, I put the actual PDF up to the screen so that it will be clear for those watching. We are still, I mean, when we talk about the 1.4 million, that is down from what we projected at second interim for next year, but we're also obviously down dramatically compared to what we are showing for 19-20. We are receiving about $25,000 from the state in 19-20. That shows up as revenue on our restricted side of our budget. That is going to be used to offset some operating loss for our food service. That area, just due to the circumstances, our participation rates are obviously lower than if all students were at school. And so unlike the LCFF revenue, where we are essentially being held harmless for the current year, despite operating in a distance education mode, the food service program is still being reimbursed on a per meal basis. And so we're experiencing, some operating loss there due to that change. So we are going to use the aid funds from the state to help offset that loss. So those are the only additional funds for current year that we show related to COVID. For 2021, we also are receiving some federal funds, and that was under the CARES Act. And that is a little over 300,000 that we see come in as restricted revenue in 2021. And essentially we have broad flexibility to use those funds. And so we are using them to offset the dramatic revenue loss that we are experiencing for next year. So we will see when we get to the multi-year projection that that revenue for the following year goes down further because we have those funds in as one-time revenue in 2021. Mark has talked about many of the positions and changes, staffing, sort of consolidations that we're attempting to do in a way that mitigates impact to people. And most all of those things that he has discussed with you guys are represented in the budget. So the savings from those changes are represented here in the 2021 projection. That includes the PE positions that Paula mentioned. So I believe, you know, the formal action for that takes place at the next meeting, but we needed to see how it would look in this budget in order to kind of guide additional decisions. So those are incorporated. There's also the planning that is taking place in terms of how on-site education and instruction would look if we return in the fall to on-site instruction. And Mark mentioned, you know, the ratios and such. Some of that may not be represented here. So I have, you know, to give you the caveat that depending on what we have to do in order to get our ratios correct, there is potential that we may need to add FTE. So I just want to be clear about that.
And based on what I put out, Nikki, we have to probably add two teachers at Blosser.
Okay. Right. And essentially, just for everyone's clarity, as Mark mentioned earlier too, it's just a timing issue. You know, this has been a wild ride. And as we've all talked about, we're getting updates on things day to day. So we've tried to incorporate everything we possibly can, but at a certain point I have to, you know, move forward and publish. So this is where we're at right now. Do want to highlight in particular regarding that revenue, back to the LCFF really briefly, that this revenue projection is based on the governor's May revision proposals. So I know there is a lot of discussion in the Senate and the legislature about their proposals, and they look somewhat different. So we do not yet know what the adopted budget is going to look like, but we moved forward based on the governor's proposal. We obviously hope to see some federal revenue come in which case they would trigger off some of the cuts that we see here. In addition, related to the governor's proposal, we did incorporate his proposed PERS and STRS rates. I think everyone is pretty familiar with the fact that PERS and STRS rates have been going up at dramatic rates every year. And essentially his May revision proposal paused some of those increases for the 2021 year to give us some relief, which was really a critical component to allow districts to absorb these revenue reductions. We will see in the multi-year projection that we have incorporated his projections all the way across the 3 years. Let's see, so ultimately, where I think we all end up wanting to look is what are the net increase or decrease to fund balance. So you can see that for current year, we are clearing a positive change to fund balance of just under $100,000 in the unrestricted side. And that changes then dramatically next year as we deal with those revenue reductions. And you can see that the deficit spending that we are projecting currently is about $855,000. That is about $350,000 more than what we were projecting to deficit spend as of second interim. And I have to say, for the fact that we are absorbing such dramatic revenue reductions, to only have an increase to our deficit of $350,000, I think means that Mark has done an excellent job of identifying changes that we can make in a very short period of time. So
Nikki, I just want to address how, because I'll get asked this, how did you end the year positive 100 when we were losing a bunch of revenue?
So we already were not projecting a massive deficit for current year. We did end up coming in with higher revenue than what we projected for current year. That is because we had, I think we've talked about it multiple board meetings, we had a pretty large increase on enrollment. And because I was very conservative in that revenue projection, because with that kind of a bump, there was nothing to predict what the final P2 outcome would be, because something like that could be a temporary bubble, and we don't want to overstate our revenue and have P2 come in lower. So we ended up coming in on our final P2 ADA about 12 ADA higher than what we had projected throughout the year. So that it helps us in the sense that it adds to the fund balance as we move into 2021. Of course, we then go immediately into a deficit spending mode. And if there's no questions about this view, I'm going to move over to the multi-year projection view of this.
Hold up.
Are there?
I have a couple of questions, Nikki.
Sure.
The first is, the state's going to, theoretically, the state's going to approve a budget by the 15th.
Correct.
You're going to have another meeting the 21st? 22nd? My assumption is you're going to get some different information from the state immediately following the 15th. Will you be able to include that for our meeting on the 21st?
I don't know if I will be able to do that. I will be having to take some time off to take care of a family member's medical needs. So that may be a bit of a push. I will try if it's possible. Just to clarify, the law requires that if anytime, the state almost always adopts their budget after we have adopted our budget. So anytime the state adopts a budget that has any material differences from what we have adopted, we are then required to do what they call a 45-day revision. So we have 45 days from when the state adopts their budget to incorporate any material revenue changes into our budget. So,
but Nikki, we'll probably, between you and I talking, we'll be able to know what our projected impact is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, yes, because really when it comes to rolling that piece of it in, that's like one, especially with LCFF, right? It's one main line item in the budget. When we start getting into other changes that causes, so if we begin discussing other staffing changes as a result, that becomes more time consuming and difficult to get into the actual budget. But we can certainly provide, our updated projections.
We'll have a guess of what it's going to do to us, plus or minus. And that's really,
My last question on this particular segment of the budget. Item number 6 on your Form 01, capital outlay. It shows that in the current budget, we've spent approximately $552,000. It shows that in the next year's budget, we're only going to spend $2,500.
Yeah, so we did some purchasing. We had the bus grants this year. I believe 2 of them. Is that right, Mark?
Yeah.
And were the vans this year? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. If the
Last year, I believe.
Okay, so the capital outlay for this year is the 2 buses that were grant funded. The 2,500 is one that we've been paying off essentially over time. So when we purchased the ag truck, we paid it out in cash, but we've been expensing that over time because it allows us to use the some of the ag funding towards that without hitting them all at once.
Okay, it was just a dramatic change from one year to the next.
Absolutely, yeah.
In our budget, big capital outlay items usually relate to grants. And so if we get some magic grants again, you'll probably see capital outlay would go up, but it's a grant supported one.
And actually, I'm glad that you mentioned that, Mark, because it also sparked something for me that I should let you all know, that there's been the ongoing water fountain projects, and we were approved for grant funding for that. I do not have that incorporated in the budget. I mean, we expect there to be no impact to our dollars, but the revenue and expenses for that are not yet incorporated, only because I'm a little unsure where we're going to see the timing of that. We're right on the cusp, and I'm unsure whether that's going to end up being 1920 or 2021. But by first interim, that will be fully incorporated.
We have all the products sitting in the bus garage. We're going to start installation next week. We won't be done by July.
Right.
And that's, I think it's about 170,000 was the drinking fountain grant somewhere.
I believe so. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, but again, it you know, there's revenue fully covering all of the expenditures related to that.
Well, we don't have any out of pocket.
Exactly. Any other questions on this form before we move to the multi-year projection?
Nope. And while you're moving that, I just want to note the fact that one of the things you'll notice is that the reason we're able to absorb a bigger hit next year is that we were pretty financially prudent this year, especially starting from March, to make sure we didn't spend what we didn't have. And there were savings and there were expenditures that we had. We lost a boatload in food service because we weren't putting out many meals and paying everybody. You know, we didn't buy as many meals, but we also were paying a lot out. And it's the only revenue source program.
But we saved a bit on diesel.
We did save a bit on diesel, and we shut down heat. We shut down some freezers. We did some things to help us. But
yeah. And some of that, I was still conservative in the 1920 estimated actual update, only because it's been difficult to try to project out what the true impact will be over May and June. Essentially where we're at is, you know, we've paid April utility bills, and I'm leery to undershoot that too much. So we may potentially see additional savings there. I'm hoping that is the case. Some other areas where we may see some savings will be related to things like athletics, which, you know, we didn't have as many of the year-end events, transportation for field trips and such. So I'm hoping at closing, we will see at least a little bit of savings there.
Just safe to say that we made sure we did not deficit spend this year, because that would have compounded.
Absolutely, yeah. And so now that we're in the multi-year projection screen, I'm gonna actually go right to the change in fund balance, because I think it is a really critical piece of it, and we can back up into the different components as needed. But as you can see, the first column 855, that's what we looked at for 2021. It grows just dramatically over time. And what we're seeing is that we are able in 2021 to meet our board designated 6% reserve with some unassigned balance remaining after that.
Nikki, what page is that?
You guys don't have it in the printed copy. This was the multi-year projection that I was still finishing.
Okay.
Getting printed. So this is on screen. I did email it to our board as well as to our union leaders, and we can make sure this is available to others between now and the adoption meeting. This is just the hearing meeting.
But we can't see it.
What was that, Paula?
We can't see it. It's not on the screen.
It's not on the screen?
No,
Yours is, Nikki.
not on mine.
Paula, are you able to minimize your, like the picture part where you're seeing people's faces?
No, I don't even have people's faces. Just you are a little circle with a capsule looking thing under you. And that's it.
You're seeing the PDF, right, Paula? What Nikki has on her screen.
I've got the same thing we've been looking at, revenues and other financing sources.
Oh.
The multi-year projection now, Paul, we changed.
Yeah, Nikki flipped up a different screen. It looks
right, and it's
similar, but it's not.
Are you able to like click on
this isn't.
to enlarge it?
Okay, now I clicked on you and I did get a different one, but the minute I unclick you, it disappears.
It goes away.
Yep.
Does anybody else have any suggestions how to keep that up? My view of it is that it's staying there no matter what I do, so I'm not sure how to advise.
Your projection you're talking about, Nikki. So it's in the shared screen on Zoom.
It is, okay.
Okay.
So another option for you, Paula, just as a side note, is I did email this PDF to you, so it's in your email.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
good then, thanks.
And so as we move into the second year of our multi-year projection, which is 21-22, we are deficit spending by almost $2 million, and that depletes our fund balance to the point where we no longer will meet a 6% reserve. If we were to do 6% in that year, it would be $1,192,000 for a reserve, and you can see that there's only 954.
What are your assumptions with regard to revenue?
So the revenue assumptions, you can see that we have another drop to the LCFF revenue, about $400,000. We also lose that $330,000 one-time revenue from the federal CARES relief funds. Those are the sort of primary pieces that drive the revenue side of this. And then that carries out a bit into the third year. There's another drop to LCFF, although not as dramatic. And at that point, we've already absorbed the removal of the one-time funds.
And the offshoot of this is going to be our multi-year projection will probably get us into that unqualified status again.
Right. So we will be filing qualified, which the definition of that is that we believe we may not meet our obligations in one of the out years of the multi-year projection. So in other words, we're not negative. We can meet our obligations in current year, but as you can see when we get down here to fund balance for the third year, which is 22-23, we no longer have enough to cover the deficit spending. So not only do we not have enough to meet the reserve for economic uncertainty, we can't even meet all of our obligations in the budget. Another item I do want to mention that is incorporated on the expense side is that we have a position which currently is being funded through ROP funds at the county office. Essentially, that funding runs out at the end of 2021, and the position currently is not on our books because that is literally being paid for by MCOE. Once that revenue is gone, they will no longer keep that position. We will need to incorporate that. That is something we've known, and we've been incorporating that in all of our multi-year projections for the last 2 years. But that is an additional FTE over 2021. And of course, we then also incorporate the increases to STRS and PERS in those 2 additional years.
The bottom line is every district's going to show that unqualified. There's nobody in the county, even Mendocino probably won't even be able to make that obligation.
Yeah, the changes are so dramatic. I just can't, imagine any district not being qualified or negative at this point. I'm very grateful that we are not negative, that we are, I think as Mark and Alex have pointed out, we have the time to look to the future, look to these 2 years, make determinations about what we can do, and also hopefully receive additional revenue and some relief from the federal government to help alleviate some of this. One of the things I really want to emphasize, though, as we move forward, although we show that we can meet our obligations in that second year, cash flow is going to become a real issue for us. So while we've had fund balance, we have not really had to be overly concerned about cash flow because there's enough money sitting there throughout the year as our expenditures and payrolls are happening, despite whenever the revenue will come in from the state. As we go into that second year and our ending fund balance is much lower, we're going to have to really carefully watch what those cash flows look like because we will not have enough sitting there to help buffer, and we will be having to analyze what will be the revenue schedule, the receipt schedule for the actual cash to come in to ensure that we can make our payroll. Payroll typically runs about $1 million a month. So if we, and these revenues from the state, they don't come in a steady fashion. They have these schedules where you might get a chunk here and a chunk there, but you could go several months where you're not getting revenue. The other issue is that the state has already been very clear that they will be using cash deferrals as a way to balance their own budgets. And so when we close out fiscal years, they will not be giving us our apportionments until the following fiscal years in order to balance their current year budgets. So it's really, really going to be important that we try to, bring that, close that gap a bit for that second year and third year.
Well, in layman's terms, they send us an IOU and say, we know you owe it, but we don't have it. And we have to have $1 million on hand every month to meet payroll.
Just for payroll. So, and what I will do also when we come back for the adoption of this, I'm going to have a graph which shows, it sort of overlays fund balance against cash flow, which I think is a really good visual because they are 2 very separate issues, but they strongly influence each other.
I know that in years past, when we were at the last financial downturn, we did have to borrow money from the county.
Yes. Yeah, I know that our county director of fiscal for MCOE has been in communication with the county treasury to try to determine what kind of flexibilities they will be able to offer. it depends a lot on what other agencies in the county, what kind of cash they're holding. So sometimes they have been able to sort of consolidate us against each other. And if another district perhaps has, bond funds or other cash that's sitting there that they're not going to use until a later date, that can help balance it out if there's a district whose cash flow is in a crunch. So, there is some ability to work with them, but I mean, it requires constant vigilance and communication once we start getting into that territory.
Well, and prior to you, Nikki, when I first got here, we were unqualified and we worked ourselves out of it. So we'll do it again. It's just
Yep.
there's no way to stop this one.
Absolutely. I mean, truly, the origin of doing the multi-year projection is to be a tool to allow us to see what our budget would look like if we did not make any changes or, based on current assumptions. It's not set in stone. It's not that there's nothing we can do about this or that circumstances won't change, but we have to be able to look down the road and say, okay, what are the possibilities? And we have to be able to prepare for them. And this is simply a tool that allows us to do that.
Yeah. We're not betting around on 3 years out. We're just trying to get through next year.
Yep. And I am, grateful again that we have been able to take action quickly to allow us to be in a better place than I think many districts will be next year.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comments with respect to the public hearings?
Call you later, Mom. All right, Angel, bye.
Anybody want to unmute their mic and speak up with respect to the budget? Not hearing any comments, we'll move on. We'll close the public hearing on the budget. The public comments for items not on the agenda. The public comments for items not on the agenda. Anybody has anything to say, please unmute your mic and speak up.
While they're deciding, one of the things I want to make sure that folks understand is that Nikki and Trina and Laura especially, and Dan and Tessa have been dealing with a lot of, what are you going to do? You want to do what? And we've had to do a lot of that and make plans and then work it through the budget, work it through HR, work it through unions, make sure we get that. But, there's no double secret plot. The plot's really simple. I want to keep everybody employed, reduce our expenses as best we can to minimize this. 80% of every dollar is going to go to people. It's not going to go to books and other stuff. So
most of these personnel changes that you've been talking about, you have been in concert with Tessa and Dan.
Yep.
In large part for most of this.
Yep.
We need to catch up.
Yeah, but
I want to ask that just because I've been, for want of a better word, lambasted by a few individuals that were concerned that there wasn't enough collaboration with respect to making some of these decisions. First, I want to make a point that these kinds of decisions ultimately are administrative right. But secondarily, I agree that the superintendent should be working with our labor groups to try and find a way to make these changes as painless as they can possibly be and still meet the needs of the district. So to that end, I would suggest that if there's an issue with respect to one of these things that you don't know about, please take it to your union leadership first. And if they don't answer your question, please take it back to the superintendent. If they don't answer your question, please beat down my door, ring my phone, send me an email. Do the same thing with the rest of your board, but get the answers that you need. And if we're not communicating well enough, please let us know. We want to know if you want to be transparent. Further, public comments for items not on the agenda. Hearing none. Items for future agenda, I have one. Anybody else got anything first? Okay, it is my opinion that the board needs to make a decision with respect to what we are going to do in terms of opening school in August.
Alex, you're breaking up.
And it's my opinion that we should make that decision either about July 3rd or around July 13th. The reason why I want to have it relatively early in July is it gives our administration and our staff the opportunity to plan for whether we are going to actually open school with something like the COVID plan, something similar to the COVID plan that's been put out in draft form, or are we going to be in a distance or remote learning model? And if we're going to be in either one of those, I want to make sure that we give staff and administration as much time as necessary to make those plans. I want to make sure we're clear about this also, and that is, if we, for example, choose to open with a COVID plan on, say, July 3rd, we make that choice. If August rolls around, circumstances have changed such that it does not seem prudent or safe to open with the COVID plan, obviously we will fall back to the distance learning model. Converse is equally true. If on July 3rd, if one is closing the meeting, if we close that meeting saying we're going to go with the distance learning model, then the plan would be we start putting resources and planning towards a distance learning model. But if circumstances change such that it makes sense to fall back to a classroom-based model, then we would obviously, in early as soon as we can, make that change. But my point is we do need to make the choice. We need to make it in a reasonable period of time. I think the reasonable period of time is either July 3rd or July 13th. That's my schedule. I don't know what the rest of the board is.
What's the latest decision logistically? I know you've already put things in place, but logistically, what's the latest time? Because I'm thinking the later we make that decision, the more changes will go. Seems to be changing.
I think the smart money is to say, regardless of what we know in August, let's prepare to be in a COVID schedule. Coming back as normal could possibly happen, but it's easy to transition back into that. It's harder to get into a COVID schedule that has the staffing. So if we make that our plan and say, as of right now, this is what we would do.
I'm comfortable with that.
And by August 1st, for sure, if there's outbreaks, and I mean, it's pretty common. If you're shelter in place at home, we're not coming to school. So that will dictate probably through county health where we're going to be with that. But I think we should plan on, so the worst case scenario is we went into our COVID schedule for the first trimester, even though we didn't need to. That's okay. We're still going to be in a really good educational model.
Still, the board needs to make a decision one way or the other. And I think that this group, for example, you guys need to be able to come back and tell us, during the meeting, for example, earlier today when we were talking about the committee was helping develop this as an example. Some of your group is saying, we need to know as soon as possible in order to be able to make the change. Others are going to be able to make that transition much more easily, depending on what their responsibilities are, what their grade levels, whether they're special ed or not, so on and so forth. Everybody's going to have a different idea. But again, I'm looking at this thing from a board position. We need to make a decision at some point. I don't want to make the wrong decision by expressing that. But I do want to make that decision as reasonably soon as we can to give everybody the opportunity to do what they need to do.
Here's what I'm wondering. If we go in with our whole focus on the COVID plan, and we have to go to a virtual plan that we haven't really prepared for,
I think
that's
they
going to be
should.
harder than coming up with a distance plan and then regressing to the COVID.
I think that a distance learning plan needs to be part of the COVID plan. that I don't think, especially 6 through 12, that every one of those classes need to have their online component established, which should be part and parcel of it. The COVID high school plan actually puts the high school in 4 days of instruction and a day where they do online only. The problem is in the K-5 world. You can't teach a kid to read on the computer. And so we have to figure out how to get kids here in this building with teachers in the best way possible. That's where the struggle online is going to come. The online instruction is a big burden K-5. That's why when I've talked to the elementary folks, we've talked about using as our baseline of instruction, like that thing says, the workbook that goes with benchmarks, the workbook that goes with everyday math, RAS kids, reading A to Z, AR, and IXL. We have to figure that out. We have to figure out if we're doing unlocking the code, it really has to be done at school because parents can't do it. By the way, parents can't do a lot of everyday math at home either, but that's the truth of the situation. I probably had 100 people tell me, I was good till we got to 4th grade. I'm out. But the reality is we have that online K-5 is really critical. The 6-12 online portion should be part and parcel of the program. It needs to be built into what we're doing. And so that concerns me the most. K-5 at home concerns me the most. And getting K-5 to school the most often is the priority. The 6-12, my concerns there are making sure that we have an online option to fall back to. I personally think we're going to start in a COVID schedule and we'll see which way the needle goes. It's either going to go to, we can open back to a normal schedule, which would probably happen in Thanksgiving, because that's the end of the first trimester, or the needle's going to be going the wrong way, and because the high school's in 6-week and all that stuff, we're going to regress back into a online program. So the only real question for me is, do we start online or in a COVID schedule? Not whether we start back normal with new rules. That's not responsible.
However, the nightmare scenario is reenacting what we just did. We did that all on the fly.
Yep.
We had to make it up, and we don't want to be there. We want to know if we need to start planning. Or, is every student going to have a Chrome? Are we going to have the technology? Can we access benchmark online?
And what,
get hotspots?
well, what we talked about with technology was the Chromebooks, we'll have Chromebooks 3 through 12. Those can go home. We need to move any iPads we have down to Brookside. So those could be usable tools. The issue really isn't hardware. Most people have the hardware. In fact, if you have internet access, you have the hardware. If you don't have internet access, why would you buy the hardware? So our issue is we can get people hardware.
I delivered 11 laptops. Only 3 of those laptops.
Yeah.
Because they were using data on a cell phone or something.
Right.
Like that.
That's what I mean. It's the access that's the issue. It's not the hardware. The hardware we can overcome easily as a district. The access, I started today with Brook Trails. At Brook Trails, they're going to make their community center. They're going to open up their bandwidth so anybody can pull up in the parking lot and use it. I'm trying to work with every public entity we have, airport, fire stations, all these people who have internet access. If I were the governor, I would require all public facilities to open up their internet access to people. because it's theirs. They buy it anyway. They're paying for it. But we should be able to drive up to those facilities just like you can to all of our schools and use the internet. But getting it out to people, hotspots are irrelevant, because if you have a Verizon hotspot, I can tell you I have a Verizon phone. When I get past second gate to third gate, I have no signal. A hotspot's not going to help you. Hotspots only work where you have cell signal. And so getting everybody a hotspot, first of all, wouldn't solve the problem. Secondly, is a $50,000 expense that maybe is going to work. So what we have to do is provide internet access. They're going to have to go there. And remember, 3 through 12, a Chromebook remembers the last 100 things you've done. And so as soon as they go into Wi-Fi, it'll sync up. So they can come into Wi-Fi, get all their assignments, do all that stuff, get all of it, go back home, do their stuff, bring it back down into Wi-Fi and resync. So it's going to require them to move a little bit to do it, but bringing internet to their home, high-speed, reliable internet, it's not going to happen at any time soon. And so, yeah, I mean, Robert lives way up on the top of, yeah, and so it's going to be hard. But he can come down the hill to Brook Trails Community Center and light up all their devices at one time, do what they got to do, and move on. Us getting hardware to the kids is not the problem. We can get hardware out. It's getting the internet access that's the problem. And so that's not us. I got to work with others to get that.
Hey, Mark, I have a question.
Yeah, they got to create the platform. Yeah, Don.
I was curious about these families that don't want to send their kids back because they either don't want them to wear a mask or they just are uncomfortable with it. Is there a virtual option going to be offered to some of these families? Or because I am reading a lot of people that are really anxious on Facebook about not sending them back, and I would hate for them to go to another district or one of these other schools because they could do it at home.
Some of those questions are going to be answered with the surveys that we're putting out.
Okay.
Help us determine the course of action based on those.
Yeah, Don, we met today to try and put together the skeleton of what a parent survey is going to look like and a teacher survey is going to look like. So within a week, we'll have that out and we'll be able to answer some of those questions. But we can't just have people randomly say, oh, I'm going to just put my kid on independent study. I have to be staffed for that.
Right.
There's a 20-to-1 teacher ratio on independent study. And so I have to be staffed for that. Right now, we only have 5 kids who are K-8 in independent study. We only have 5. Those kids are being serviced by a person for about a third of their time. If we have 50 kids who want to do that, the problem is they're going to be in 8 different grades randomly. They're not going to all be like 5th grade. Okay, well, we need one less section of 5th grade. That's not how it's going to play out.
Right.
And so some of the other things with independent study is we have to make sure that parents understand if, for example, we're in a COVID schedule and we had a 16-to-1 ratio, a kid can't just say, you know what, I'm not going to do independent study anymore. I'm going to go to Mrs. Ford's class in 3rd grade. We're going to say no because we have to have an opening to do that. So if you choose independent study, you also have to choose to get back in when there's an opening. Because I can't just start flipping people around or say, oh, gee, Tessa, would you take 20 kids instead of 16? We have to stay true to our model if we're going to stay true to our model and try and prevent those kind of things from happening.
There's also a difference between distance learning and independent study.
Absolutely. That's part of what we put out in the survey. I wanted to make sure that people understand the difference. Online learning means you have your teacher, your classroom. it's things you're not doing in your classroom, but you could do in the classroom with the teacher. Independent study means I take all my instruction from one person, all 4 subjects. I meet with them an hour a week. I get my stuff and I go do it and I bring it back the next week. It is very incumbent on the parent to help their child and to make sure their kid is self-motivated. That's the issue with independent study, is that if it's not working, we can't just pull the plug and say, okay, well, we're going to stick you back in a regular class. Just like we found out with online learning, it has the same flaw. If you're not self-motivated in your regular classroom, you maybe aren't so self-motivated at home. All of the kids who were unsuccessful in our online school, it wasn't because of access. Okay, there were a lot of kids unsuccessful who had plenty of access. In fact, they were probably on Xbox instead of Zoom. So we have to have a program that's going to work for that. And there is a huge difference between the two. So when we say online opportunities, that's talking about classroom instruction. That's where the teacher presents something on Zoom. They watch a Khan Academy video. They have a workbook that goes along with it. That's very different than I'm an independent study and I'm going to meet with my independent study teacher next week, Thursday, and I got to have this packet stuff.
So I would bring it back to, is there support for having a meeting in July to make a decision on the direction we're moving? So could we wait until later?
Just for clarification, so essentially what we did is set a proposal in writing, public from Mark, and then vote for the group.
We'll also be looking at hopefully current trends with respect to what COVID-19's been doing locally. Also, we should be able to review whatever is current at the time coming from our county health department and from the state health department, and hopefully from the California Department of Education with regard to that. Current with the information that we have right now, whether we open school in whatever format we want in terms of classroom-based, or we open school in an entirely distance education model, that's right now, that is entirely up to us. Now, that needs to be changed by mid-July or even sometime in August.
And we'll have the survey information back.
Right, we should have a survey information back by the last week of June, hopefully by the last week of June. So really, the big question I have is how much time the community, talking about WTA, the community, to be able to react to the decision that we make in July, or whatever we make.
Well, I think it would be prudent to opt for July 13th, because of the post-4th of July testing data that might be included in that.
And we can push it off to another week if you want, but
Yeah.
I'm
We'll hit the ground with our feet running, just like we did when school started.
But I would suggest that the board needs to take a look at their calendars. Hopefully in mid-July. The earliest I can meet after the 3rd is the 13th. I would argue we should be meeting somewhere the week of the 13th, or in the week of the 20th.
Sooner the better. Because honestly, I think our decision is going to be fairly simple in August.
And I hope it is.
I think it'll be either clear cut. If we were making the decision today, we would probably be in a COVID schedule based on our experiences.
And the other thing is, you mentioned the possibility of a later start. I'm very much in favor of a later start. I think the rest of the board.
For example,
Of a what?
3 or 4 days in our calendar
Oh, okay.
and start August 31st.
Does the rest of the board have any?
And if we did that, we'll not only have more time to get prepared, we'll also have a very good idea of what's going on elsewhere. Yeah, I mean, Ukiah will be in a session for 3 weeks before that happens. So we'll get a we'll get a local taste of,
That doesn't mean that we would come later in the summer.
no, we could be, here's one of my proposals would be, and I'm not negotiating at a board meeting, but there's simple things. Martin Luther King Day is a really simple example. If we have remote learning on Martin Luther King Day, there's no better time to teach tolerance and acceptance than on Martin Luther King Day. That's a perfect day to have a lesson on that. Veterans Day, those kind of things, those holidays that are in those ways, if we could use those as, if you want to call them online day or virtual days, if we did that, we could carve 3 or 4 days out really easily and not even impact vacation day. If we did that, then we could start August 31. And again, just because you give a kid a lesson for Martin Luther King Day doesn't mean they didn't do it the Friday before or the Tuesday after. I'm just saying we can count those as instructional days if we make those virtual days and we actually have a lesson prepared for those days that is virtual. And so if we do that, we get a little creative with our calendar, carve off 3 or 4 days, we can start August 31 and not really impact any other holidays and get a sense of what's going on. August 25th or 26th? Wednesday. So if we didn't have school that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we'd come back August 31. And then we would, well, we could even still hold, because we would claim those days as instructional days. We would say that we gave out virtual assignments on those 3 days. And that would be, those are instructional days. But I think the whole notion of 180 days and all that's going to get thrown out of the window anyway. When people start doing AB days. Yeah, when you do AB days, you're down to 90 days. So I'm pretty confident that's going to get tossed out the window. So we may not even have the need to do that with those national holidays, but they are opportunities for us if we have to stay to 180 where we can get creative. I think they'll give us a lot of latitude on those days. Yeah.
Thanks for checking your calendar. Mr. Kovic, are you available the week of the 13th to the 17th of July? Looking for Mr. Kovic and Paula. Check your calendar.
Paula is available on the 13th or 17th. I mean, on the 3rd or the 17th. I don't care. I mean, just tell me when and I'm working at being there.
Bob, are you there?
Yes.
So check your calendar, Bob. Are you available for a meeting the week of the 13th of July?
Just a second.
Is there another meeting in June also?
22nd.
22nd?
Yeah.
So can I actually ask for confirmation related to that date? Because I know it was mentioned earlier, but I thought our scheduled June meeting was the 17th.
We had to have a meeting at least 5 days after the state approved their budget if we were going to do any type of
Reduction, yeah.
Got, okay, so the 17th is totally rescheduled to the 22nd.
We'd be on the 14th.
We'll have, there will be a third meeting on the 22nd. We can make the budget.
Can we consolidate that to the 22nd?
Be on the 10th.
It'll be fine to be either way.
Right.
Well, the 22nd is dependent on if we have,
No sour cream. There's a tin in the fridge.
The 17th I know has to fly. The 22nd has the potential, if we're not doing certified layoff, we don't have that.
So our board dates are 17 for sure.
Yeah.
June 22nd, maybe.
Maybe. And
We're gonna start at 5 on the 17th.
Are you going to a Friday? Going to do a Friday meeting?
On the 17th.
Oh, sorry.
So on July 17th, we have a meeting?
June 17th.
Oh, okay, that was switched to the 22nd. Okay.
June 17th, 5 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
If we have one June 22nd, it will be 5 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
And then now we're talking about either the first week of
By
July.
noon at the latest.
I thought we were looking at July 13th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
13th.
July 13 to 17. Bob, what's your schedule? Are you okay on those?
On June or July?
July 13 to 17.
July 13th or 17th?
No,
July 13th, we're at UCSF.
No, I'll be in
July
San Francisco.
17th, we're home. The 17th, we're home.
17th, July 17th, I'm available.
Okay, so the 17th of July is available. Paul, are you available July 17th?
Sure.
Others?
The 16th would probably be better. Let's go to Wright's Lake.
I'm available the 16th too.
That's set for 5 o'clock on June 17th, July 17th. 5 o'clock, July 17th.
What about the 16th instead?
5 o'clock, July 17th.
Yeah, 5 o'clock, July 17.
Got it. Thank you.
All right.
Hi, Kitty.
What about the 16th?
That's because you practice doing out that way. No, but the problem is you have to stay with the group. So I'll have the others. I cannot consider them to the group. We have to see that to be one group. And I can't say it. You place to do that.
It's okay. It's okay. It's
Yep.
Okay, we are, I think, to the end of this meeting, unless somebody has anything else, any other items for the future agenda.
We had a lot of people drop off. They must not have kept the excitement going.
So I'd love to have somebody make a motion to adjourn. I'll also move.
Thanks for getting all that done, Nikki. I appreciate it.
Adjourn has been motioned and
No,
seconded.
no problem.
Excuse me. In favor.
Thank you, everybody.
That's
Okay, good
July,
night.
right?
Bye.
Mark, I did transfer the host back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.